Samuel Coleridge-Taylor was a British composer of West African descent.
An English composer, conductor, and activist.
And he came to prominence in the early 20th century.
He was a great violinist.
I know his mother loved the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge so much so that she named her son for him, which can be confusing at first.
I first learned about Samuel Coleridge-Taylor in the fall of 2009. I was studying in London at the Royal College of Music for a semester, and a classmate mentioned his cantata Hiawatha's Wedding Feast.
The first time I heard Coleridge-Taylor's music, I was in high school. It was Hiawatha's Wedding Feast.
And I was shocked that I hadn't heard of him before.
I was hired as a choral singer in his Hiawatha cantatas 8 years ago for his centenary. And at the time, I had never heard of him. I didn't know anything of his music.
I must confess that this was the first time for me to learn and perform his music.
Samuel Coleridge-Taylor is not currently a household name in classical music, but during his lifetime he was considered a formidable talent and referred to as the African Mahler. Coleridge-Taylor was born in London in 1875 to an English mother and a doctor from Sierra Leone of Creole ancestry descended from people formerly enslaved in the U.S. He grew up among his mother's family in Croydon and showed great promise early on as a violinist. His family sent him to the Royal College of Music at age 15, where he studied composition with Charles Villiers Stanford.
The clarinet quintet in F-sharp minor. He wrote this after a concert at the college in March 1895 when Brahms's quintet had been performed. It had been suggested that no one could write for this combination of instruments without showing the influence of the famous Brahms work, so Coleridge-Taylor took on the challenge. When Stanford examined the result, he turned to my father and said, "You've done it, my boy." Delighted with his pupil's work, Stanford took the score with him on his next visit to Berlin and showed it to Joachim, who was sufficiently impressed to rehearse it with his quartet on that occasion and subsequently to arrange for its performance in Germany.
After receiving his degree, young Samuel began teaching and conducting, as well as writing music. Coleridge-Taylor's music soon attracted attention. Edward Elgar wrote the young composer a recommendation, and his former teacher, Charles Villiers Stanford, conducted the premiere of Hiawatha's Wedding Feast, the first of his 3 grand cantatas for soloist, choir, and orchestra inspired by Longfellow's epic poem. Samuel was 23 years old. Success followed almost instantly. Sir Arthur Sullivan himself spoke highly of Coleridge-Taylor's talent, and he toured the U.S. 3 times, even receiving an invite to the White House from President Theodore Roosevelt. In America, Coleridge-Taylor became more interested in his father's American heritage and became the youngest delegate to the first Pan-African Conference in 1900. There, Samuel met such important Black American thinkers and literati as Paul Laurence Dunbar and W.E.B. Du Bois. Samuel married his former classmate Jessie Walmesley the year after Hiawatha's Wedding Feast premiered, and the couple's 2 children followed their father's musical example. Their son Hiawatha would go on to adapt and conduct his father's works, while his sister Gwendolyn, using her middle name Avril professionally, became a pianist, composer, conductor in her own right. Even with his relative fame, Coleridge-Taylor endured significant financial difficulties. Hiawatha's Wedding Feast sold hundreds of thousands of copies, but he failed to benefit monetarily, having sold the rights to the work up front for a mere 15 guineas. He learned to retain the rights to his compositions thereafter, but the money problems persisted, and after his death, Coleridge-Taylor's plight spurred reforms in British intellectual property law. Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's music may not have retained its popularity in classical circles, but his example inspired a generation of Black Americans, spurring them to found a choral ensemble named for him and to name schools and other organizations in his honor. Until his untimely death from pneumonia at only 37, Coleridge-Taylor remained committed to fighting racism and defying expectations. "I am a great believer in my race," he once wrote to a friend, "and I never lose an opportunity of letting my white friends know it."
Although he only lived to be 37, his output is extraordinary in terms of scope.
I love that he set the texts of women and people of color very frequently at a time when that wasn't common.
And there is undeniable lyricism and poetry in his music.
It struck me with its lyrical sensibility.
Lyrical, orchestral in nature, full of color.
It was absolutely rewarding experience.
A joy to perform.
Expressiveness of the lines.
He wears his heart on his sleeve musically, but in a very stylish way. And at times his harmonic language can be truly innovative.
Coleridge-Taylor demonstrates a passion and a sense of drama that, in my opinion, eclipse his British contemporaries.
Why aren't we hearing more of this music on the concert stage? It should be otherwise.
The only reason his name and his music are not as famous as Edward Elgar or Arthur Sullivan of Gilbert and Sullivan,
And I feel that it's a shame that his music isn't more well known today.
is racism.
It is a mystery that such a work should have been so ignored in the British Concert Hall. I can only echo those words and express the hope that the centenary celebrations will lead to a long overdue reappraisal of the major works of Coleridge-Taylor.
Just can't wait to sing more of his music.
And I'm very excited to explore Samuel Coleridge-Taylor's many other works.
I anticipate Indictus Project will have a robust and ongoing relationship with the music of Samuel Coleridge-Taylor.